Don't know about you all, but I love me a game where I'm some kind of powerful being that goes around slicing up evil critters. Throwing a bunch of other fun stuff like collectibles and fun side missions, and I'm completely sold. But then throw in the ability to turn the main character into a diva, and I'll practically throw money at the screen. Yep, today we're going to be talking about Stellar Blade, which easily became one of my favorite games ever the more I played it and went through Eve's journey. Join me in today's video where we'll go over addictive gameplay, outstanding character design, immersive worlds, and great sound design. This is Stellar Blade, which to me is a stellar game. Alright, let's go over the basics of Stellar Blade real quick, then discuss and criticize these aspects, starting with the combat system, considering that's the main piece of gameplay. Players take control of Eve, who uses her Stellar Blade to fight off Nativas and other evil organisms. She can block to reduce taken damage, parry to offset enemies and gain beta and burst fragments, and dodge to get out of the way of unblockable attacks. Overall, the setup is simple, but players are going to have to think about their combat strategy in order to take down the big bad bosses of this game. Players need to learn the attack patterns of their enemies to understand what to block, so they can parry, when to dodge, when to gash and slash their opponents, and how to thoughtfully use beta and burst attacks. I really liked how the parry system worked in this game. Number 1, players take no damage when they successfully parry, which will really push them to learn the timing of the enemy's attacks in this game. They simply can't stand there, blocking until their opponent stops attacking, then going for the kill. No. If they want to live and take down their opponent, they'll have to parry multiple times throughout the fight. Number 2, successful parries also increase the player's beta and burst bars, which are special attacks that do more damage than standard attacks, and also have the potential to stagger enemies and knock them flat on their ass, so the player can move in and really bring home the pain to their opposition. The beta and burst attacks are addicting to use, they look pretty, drain the enemy's health faster, and give the player a bit of a power rush, but they don't regenerate over time. The players will have to earn the satisfaction of using these bad boys. Later in the game, players will gain access to the drone gun, which can be used to fire different types of ammo. This was a great addition because the enemies and bosses only get harder and harder, so an extra weapon that can drain health bars is much appreciated. It's also a great tool to create distance between enemies to give players a breather during battles. The different types of ammo were also real fun to use, and were a great help in many boss battles. Players will also pick up a rage mode known as Tacky Mode after defeating Tacky, and while it's very helpful, it's a little underwhelming. I'm just saying, Rage Mode in other games feels so satisfying to use because of how off the rails the playable character feels, almost like nothing's gonna stop them now, as if everything in sight isn't safe from an unholy wrath. Tacky Mode feels tame, like Eve does want to destroy everything in her sight, but only to a certain extent. She's very gentle, you know? Alright, so what's not so good about the combat? It's inconsistent and weird in its blink and dodge and blocking mechanics. Okay, so blink works in this game whenever the enemy's model has a quick blue shine in which the player hits the block and dodge button at the same time, and Eve will go behind the enemy so she can deal some uninterrupted damage. Here's the thing, not every enemy has the same blink time activation, and I don't know why that's the case. It should be consistent throughout the board. Sometimes the player will have to blink just after the shine happens, or sometimes they have to wait a second or two, then blink, and I don't know any other game with a specific mechanic that has varied response times. The double dodge is so weird, and unlike any other double dodge I've ever seen in these types of games before. See, in any other game, the player's character will step back or to the side, depending on whichever direction they're pressing towards after hitting the dodge button once, and then once they hit the dodge button twice, the character does some kind of roll or extended dodge to really get out of the enemy's way, and again, they'll move in whichever direction the player is pressing towards. Stellar Blade lets players dodge in whichever direction they like, but they can't double dodge unless they're standing completely still, which I've never seen in any other similar game before, nor do I think it makes sense. Letting players double dodge in whichever direction they want gives them more freedom over their movement, and as long as they're fast enough to use it, well, it shouldn't matter which direction they go in as long as it avoids danger. It acts like a double-edged sword. Double dodging guarantees safety, but now the player's gonna have to make up for the distance between them and their enemy, ideally without getting hit. One more thing I really disliked about the combat is blocking doesn't block when hit at certain angles. It's a pretty common mechanic in these types of video games where if a player is blocking while surrounded by enemies, their character will orient themselves towards whichever enemy hit them and not take damage, or at the very least, not take as much damage. The only exception to this is some games have it so players take full damage when an enemy hits them from behind, regardless if they're blocking, which makes total sense. In Stellar Blade, Eve takes full damage and flinches if she isn't facing whichever direction the aggressor is, and it's not like players can rotate her while she blocks, so the only way to block such an attack would be to leave the block stance, rotate Eve, then block again, and this is not practical at all when facing multiple enemies. A one-on-one boss fight, sure, it works, but when those scorpion-like enemies get all up in Eve's face, it sucks. Well, that's enough about the combat. Let's talk about all the other little stuff that makes up the gameplay. Eve can travel around big areas full of stuff to collect, and she can even jump, climb, and dash to get to hard-to-reach places. The parkour is a little awkward. I felt finicky when ascending certain buildings in the wasteland, but otherwise, it's responsive for the most part, and finding an unlockable or piece of a side quest after a tough obstacle was so worth it. The open areas of this game were very fun to explore. The wasteland was probably my favorite map to explore because not only was it so open and big, but it also had a good amount of variety in terms of its architecture and landscape. No two parts of that area felt the same, and that made me want to go to every corner of the wasteland to find out what was hiding from me. The Great Desert was fun too. I enjoyed climbing all the buildings in the more urban parts of the map, and the collapsed bridges were fun to hop on too, but I felt like this area is filled a little bit too much with empty space. It is more repetitive than the wasteland. The indoor levels were great too, although I kind of wish there was a map to them considering they can get confusing to navigate, especially if the player wanted to go back and explore the area a bit more. Not to mention, it was annoying when I went back to the subway level, only to be stopped in my tracks because I couldn't climb up to higher ground to advance. They could have easily fixed this by adding a rope that hung from the top so players could easily get back up, but nope, they had to go back to the nearest telephone and fast travel. I absolutely love the customization in this game. Most other games like Stellar Blade just let players change their character's main outfit and that's it, which is just fine and dandy, but it seems more and more games as of lately let players customize more than just the character's overalls. Stellar Blade lets players change Eve's nanosuit, eyewear, hairstyle and color, and earrings, and there's not a shortage of any of these in the game, so players can really give Eve a unique look and make her look like such a doll. I'll tell you what, I could not get enough of the designer sunglasses. I knew I had to get them as soon as I saw them in the fishing store, so I spent about 30 minutes just fishing, just so I could get those stylish spectacles. Seriously, look how Eve rocks them. So stylish and graceful. Hell, I was just a huge fan of collecting all the cosmetics period, especially the nanosuits. Whenever I saw the outline of those small crates, I became so giddy knowing a nice piece of apparel was right around the corner, and I had the opportunity to give Eve a new look so she could reinvent herself again and again. Most of these cosmetic crates contain nanosuits, and man, do I love the nanosuits in this game. They're just so neatly crafted. Each of them has their own badass designs. It really made Eve pop out from the depressing landscape that she wandered across. Adam, Lily, and the drone can also have their main outfit changed. Not much to see here, but again, more customization is just fine by me. The combat customization was also really great. I loved how Eve could have 2 exospines, which gave big upgrades to general combat aspects like additional damage to combos or beta abilities, and gear for smaller but meaningful upgrades. The player can also get an assload of these upgrades, so players are spoiled for choice when it comes to what kind of combat style they want to go with when dealing with certain enemies or bosses. These 2 things also made Eve feel like a badass. If that wasn't enough, players can also upgrade their general skills, beta burst attacks, and tacky mode, so the players are going to keep upgrading Eve again and again throughout their playthrough, and even more so in New Game Plus, which we'll get into later. Aside from all the main gameplay, Stellar Blade also has small trinkets the player can collect, like the can spread throughout the game. Speaking of which, players can also fish in this game, and there's a good variety of aquatic creatures the player can catch in exchange for information, more bait, and certain cosmetics, like those delicious designer sunglasses I mentioned earlier. The fishing is simple. Just cast the reel, fight the fish, then reel them in. So getting Clyde's rewards isn't hard, but can be tedious. How in the world players get the bigger fish, I have no idea, but it doesn't matter to me. As soon as I got them Louis Vuitton glasses, I didn't look back. While still on smaller parts of the gameplay, I loved when Eve would ride her blade down a huge ass tunnel. Not only was that cool as hell, but the gameplay during that section was quite fun and adrenaline pumping. There's also the hub missions, which are just short side quests, which mostly involve Eve going to a location, checking to retrieve something, then going back to the hub to claim her reward. All fine and dandy, but the camera challenges were so addicting to me. I sunk so much time into them. For those unaware, once the player attains the camera, the hub gives certain challenges which require Eve to take a selfie in front of 10 different pieces of artwork in a certain area. And the reward? A neat nanosuit. How could I resist? The reward of a nanosuit was enough to get me looking for those drawings, but looking all around for them was also just super fun, and just challenging enough to where it was exhilarating and not overly frustrating. It was also nice of the game to give players small hints as to where the drawings were too. That way they're not going all over the map again and again looking for those pieces. Of course, NPCs spread throughout Zion will also give their own side quests, and while I did really enjoy all the side quests in this game, I felt like a good amount of them included Eve being sent out to find a lost friend or ally close to the person giving the quest, only for that person to be dead, and then Eve delivers the bad news. Could they not come up with a little bit more variety for the side quests? Like, why does everybody die? Speaking of the side quests, there's also characters in this game that act as shop vendors, and each of them sell their own type of products, but the most important part to me was the fact they all sold nanosuits. If you couldn't tell by now, I was a junkie about customizing Eve and getting every single cosmetic I could. Besides that, the player can only get access to the vendor's entire stock by buying products from them, which also gives players access to that vendor side quest if they have one. This makes players go out of their way to not only kill as much Naytibas as possible, along with searching every container they come across for some money, but it also makes them think about their purchases and how much they really want to get to the next level. Like most other Souls-like games, Stellar Blade has a New Game Plus mode where players keep all of their unlockables from their previous save file, and they can unlock new nanosuit and nanosuit variants, which I just love because, well, as I said before, getting those nanosuits were like crack to me. Had to make sure Eve looked like a diva 24/7. It also made it easier to go through another run, considering I wanted to get the 2 other unlockable endings. Okay, just one more thing about the gameplay. After beating the game, players unlock a boss stage mode where they can go back and fight certain bosses, and they can unlock nanosuits by fulfilling certain conditions. It's fine, I guess. I think a boss rush mode would have been more appropriate. Maybe have Eve fight a certain order of bosses, then afterwards get the player a certain reward for doing so, rather than just having them simply beat every boss for more nanosuits. This mode does have a new boss, Man, Oracle's bodyguard, and while he is tough to beat, he's also just a really good boss battle that tests every reflex and ability the player gained throughout the game. Alright, let's talk about the story of Stellar Blade now. It's okay. I liked all the characters and environments seen throughout, but the plot is kinda confusing when only the cutscenes are shown. Now, I know there's pieces of backstory and lore scattered throughout the game that give more insight to the overall situation the characters are in, but still, it would have been nice to know a little bit more about Mother Sphere, Adam, and Eve without having to read every little bit of information from the logs Eve can pick up. It also would have been nice to know how Eve and Taki knew each other, considering it seems they had quite a bond. From what I remember, Eve says that she was a really good friend, which, okay, sure, but how exactly did this bond form? What was it about Eve and Taki that drew them together? I know Shift Up is planning a sequel for this game, so I'm sure that I'll clear more things up and give players a bigger picture as to the overall world of Stellar Blade, so I can't be too hard on the unanswered questions. While still in the story, how many of you noticed the Christianity symbolism seen throughout the game? The fact the 2 main characters are called Adam and Eve, who also have a sidekick named Lily, a flower that often appears in Christian imagery as a symbol of innocence, which is just like her. Eve is called an angel by the humans and is seen as a savior. The Alpha Naytiba on the space station looks like a biblically accurate angel. Certain characters are big believers in Mother Sphere, while others deny she has any salvation planned for the humans, and probably a lot more other things I didn't pick up on because I only know so much about the religion. Just thought it was an interesting thing to bring up. Moving on, I really enjoyed the fact that the choice to join or reject Adam creates significantly different results story-wise and gameplay-wise. That made going through another playthrough of this game more worth it in my opinion. I not only got a new boss, but also a completely new outcome. While we're still on the end of the game, I kind of dislike the fact the end of the game is essentially just fighting 3 different bosses with some intermission in between. I wish some exploring was sprinkled in there considering how fun that part of the game was. And I guess I can't complain too much about this part of the game because before the last 4 boss fights, those being the Alpha Naytiba on the space station, the 2 Raven fights, and the final boss, the player does get to explore the big ass space station and the building before it. And that section does take some time to get through, so it's not like the game neglected players of this aspect of the game before these boss battles. Not to mention, if players filled up Lily's affinity bar, they got to explore Eidos 9, which add more to their exploring fun. The visuals for Stellar Blade are good for the most part. As I mentioned before, Eve's animations are just so stylish, and the animations for the humans during cutscenes also look pretty natural. And like the characters involved are having a conversation and paying attention to one another. I can't say the same for when Eve talks to the NPCs in this game. She just looks blankly at the ground and moves her mouth. This could have easily been fixed if she was programmed to look at the NPC's eyes rather than the ground. It would have been a perfect fix, but it would have looked more natural. Aside from all that, the character designs were pretty cool, especially the Naytibas. Each one of them looks so grotesque, but also so menacing, daunting, and each have intricate designs. Like, the amount of detail in these bad boys is insane. Every inch of their bodies was crafted so carefully. Each Alpha Naytiba also looked quite unique from one another in terms of the structure. I never felt like the developers were reusing designs or got lazy while designing these monsters. The same could be said for most of the human-like NPCs too, especially the ones that didn't have any synthetic parts. Except for Kaya and Mother Sphere. I swear, the developers used the same model for both these characters and just added some changes to differentiate them just enough. While we're here, I just wanted to bring up, Eve is very graceful and stylish in the way she moves. Notice how acrobatic she is as she jumps and goes all over the place, but also how articulate she is whenever she lands. Notice how she stabs her opponents as a finishing blow, then does this cool backflip and lands like a superhero. She's also super violent with that blade, like, girl, trust me, you didn't have to dig that deep to cut off their vital organs. I also love the fact that Eve will do one of 2 stylish animations whenever she picks up a can in the wild. Like, the developers didn't have to do this. They could have just made a simple animation where Eve carefully picks up the can, but instead, they decided to have some fun and made Eve a model by showing off the cans she picks up whenever she finds them. Stuff like that sells a game for me. Funny enough though, she does have her moments, like whenever she runs into a crate, she just kicks it open rather than gently opening it. Okay, so while most of the graphics look detailed and clean, there's some real ugly meshes of polygons that stick out like a sore thumb. Like seriously, look at some of these textures and tell me they don't look out of place with how mushy they look. I don't know if that's because of my PC settings, which all of my detail settings were on high, so I doubt it, but if it's not, that seems like such an oversight to me. Stellar Blade's soundtrack is not only banging, but it also has a good amount of variety. You got more laid-back immersive tracks while players are merely traversing the different areas in the game to add some pleasing ambience, the upbeat background songs that play whenever Eve gets close to the human-like characters to reflect about the hope and fight of the human spirit, and of course, blood-pumping hype music to get players thirsty for Naytiba blood. Some of the songs evolve and change their tempo and timbre depending on the context, such as Silent Street. Whenever players are just breezing through the place, they hear this nice, melodic, peaceful tune that's not only reflective of Eve's sadness, but also her strong will and desire to move on. Whenever they're about to kick some ass, the song's tempo speeds up and adds in some upbeat instrumentation to research Eve's survival instincts, and so players can feel energized about spicing up some bad guys. I really like the fact certain environmental songs had lyrics. They really added some spark to the music and Eve's current surroundings. A lot of them reminded me of the movement tracks from the Sonic Frontiers DLC. They just give out the same vibes. Alright, if there is one complaint I have about these songs is that it can be risky adding vocals to them because that can make them wear on the player at a quicker rate. Players are obviously going to notice the vocals considering how they stick out from the instrumentation of the songs, and they'll notice when certain sections repeat more often than they would with just an instrumental track because of that. So it would have been nice if the lyrical parts of these songs were more spaced out to not make them so repetitive. Alright, while we're still in the audio section, the voice acting is good, nothing amazing, but it does its job and each character's voice fits. Alright, one more thing before we wrap things up. Stellar Blade has had a number of updates throughout its lifetime that mostly patched stuff and added new nanosuits, but there was a Christmas theme update which added a bunch of cosmetics in line with the holiday. After all, the game has a lot of Christian imagery, so it makes sense. This update is fine and dandy, but man, there's one small little detail the developers really messed up. So, there's a President Zion that will give the player a new nanosuit that's based on Santa Claus's iconic red clothing. Here's the thing, the costume is called the Santa dress, which makes sense, but why on earth is this nanosuit not called Christmas Eve? The opportunity was right there, and they completely fumbled the bag. Overall, Stellar Blade is a really fun game that's gonna have players coming back again and again so they can learn about the fate of humans, keep Eve in peak shape by upgrading her abilities and appearance, jamming out to the adrenaline pumping boss tunes, and feel like a badass as they take down the meanest Naytibas around. The other small things like the selfie challenges, cosmetics found throughout the environments, the collectible cans, and side missions really entice the players to take a breather from the main adventure and let Eve embrace her title as Angel as she helped these humans feel more human. With all that being said, I hope you have a great day, go pick up Stellar Blade, and may your memories live on forever.